So then we are back with a modern understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services that we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, a prophet of Israel, a prophet that was not during his time yet, had revealed very plainly what the plans were, and because of the lack of the spring feast's completion was not yet available, then the people of his time did not understand him. But then, roughly 2,000 years later plus, we find ourselves then studying these holy documents and understanding then the holy instructions were true and they are taking place before our very eyes. During this time then, where we are finding more information regarding the United States, we find then the USD, or the monetary system of the United States, is obviously deteriorating very fast. And a couple of years ago, the IMF and also the Prime Minister of Israel had mentioned regarding the condition of the USD, and they mentioned very precisely that in 5 years' time, if US would not then straighten out the economical troubles of the country, obviously the system would then be destroyed. So then we find ourselves studying then the holy documents, and we find in Yeshayahu the prophet, the 61st chapter, where then there is the completion of the spring feast, autumn feast, and the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries, and understanding then the time given when the Messiah then he completed the spring feast, precisely 490 days ministry, and then forms a layer of understanding of Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, from the 1st verse until the 21st verse. Thus, as we know of, New Testament does not exist. It's simply 4 recordings of the same event. You'll find then a couple of them were Holy Hebrews, a couple of them were Gentiles. So then we find these documents being true. And after then 2009, and per the Creator's calendar 7009, then the time of deceit, the time of deception of 1,000 years granted for Nahashatan, then had ended. So then, understandably, when the Messiah was born, he was born as the king. He was king ever since he was born. Then he completed the spring feast, precisely 490 days. Prior of his death, he spent time with the Samaritans 2 Yom creation days, where we understand Shimon later said a day is equal as 1,000 years and vice versa. That's where we get our calculation for the time of the Gentiles. So then, obviously, after his ascension, then came a time of a transition from the first and second tabernacle services. And then the first holy city was then during the time of Yohanan, where then during his time he gathered the documents of the time of the dispensation of Ruach HaKodesh. Then, as he was studying and gathering those documents in layers, because the Messiah said not a layer of understanding of the instructions or the Torah would be left aside, but every layer must be completed. Then we realize only half of the instructions, or half of the Torah and half of the prophets then was completed. The other half is then the autumn feast. The autumn feast is then the sounding of the shofars and the cups. What do we understand of the holy instructions thus far? When the Greco and the Romans decided to translate those holy documents, they did not understand the layers of the prophetic. They did not understand the times and the seasons. They didn't understand the Hebrews spent more than 1,000 years training for the coming of the Messiah. They didn't understand the spring feast. They did not understand the autumn feast. Then obviously when those pagan people decided to translate those documents, they did not know where they belong. So then they began their quest by simply matching what they thought were then gathering those information and placing them together, but they layered them wrong. And the proof of it is very simple. There is a section of the autumn feast where then you find the cities being formed. the cities of, for instance, Philadelphia and so on and so forth. There are 7 of them. Those cities, they do not belong in Revelation. Those cities were put together after the first city of Yohanan, roughly 100 years after the ascension of the Messiah. So then, we find ourselves then studying why then, for instance, when the holy cities were eliminated in 1009 or 6009, there is 1,000 years of deceit. Thus then the world was introduced with the system of the Bilderberg group. However, they were obviously during the 50s, they were generated, or they were then obviously organized, more refined. But then it dates back from the time after, shortly after 1009, because the world had no holy cities anymore and lacked an order of order. Thus then the world order. Obviously then, during the time of the deceit, then ended in 2009 or 7009 per the Carrier's calendar, where then this group is no longer required. The 120 scoundrels at the time, because not only themselves as 120, but there are 7 of them yet above these scoundrels, the top scoundrels. These people are no longer required. And they understand, because they are preparing the world for not even what themselves as considering as obvious. The time of Nahashatan of deceit ended in 2009. So then there is no reason for these people. Obviously then, because they were given the false scripture, then the United States decided to build for themselves a city underground known as the Ozarks. We understand it's a very big place with many underground facilities. We understand there are 12 entrances of the mountain and 12 cities underground with farming, data and crude and transportation for the chosen few. Now let me ask you this. United States then is obviously not producing enough. How come they can come up with so much money then to build these huge complexes? But not only this, FEMA camps. Because the country is preparing then for a police state. How do they get so much money to build these? Obviously the American financial system with USD, because other nations of the world they are using USD, they are bound by the manipulation of the prices of USD, thus making a parasite amongst the nations. In our reports, we get always numbers from nations and economies based from a centralized banking system, but they never realize, what about direct trade with China? Do they have the numbers? No. So then, let's evaluate what the United States is preparing. Firstly then, obviously they understand their time is gone. The first 100 years out of 1,000 of the city was granted obviously to the Britons, or for Great Britain. But then the last couple hundred years roughly was given to America. Thus the first and second beasts of Revelation. Their time has ended. Now comes the new players, as then Daniel the 11th chapter states very plainly regarding the kingdom of the north, south, being then the Soviet Union already reactivated. In the kingdom of the south is Africa, where then the Holy Tabernacle is going to be at. Plus DRC is extremely rich, the richest place in this planet regarding minerals. They hold 80% of the deposits of coltan. Without coltan, technological advancements then are not doable these days, because coltan is more important than gold. Brazil has 20% of the deposits. And we understand then, because of Daniel has mentioned, then at some point the kingdom of the north would subdue the kingdom of the south. Because the holy prophecy of Yirmiyahu 1:8 states very importantly, the holy city then, from many centuries that was then laid waste, would then return, and the cities then later becoming plural. Obviously then, because of these, then woe to the land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, further to the south. What is further to the south that the prophet mentioned, woe, would be DRC, because it's the most important area of Africa because of trade. Daniel was a tradesperson. So then we find ourselves understanding these sectors of the instructions and becoming more acquainted with the dirty schemes of the United States and this group known as Bilderberg. They understand they don't belong anymore. After 2009, then they were no longer in charge. So then, what is the plan of the United States at the moment? They are preparing themselves for a police state because they can't maintain their system. They are not yet perceived that China has a dual system, one of them using paper money, the paper money yuan, backed up by gold. This is what used to be USD many years ago, backed up by gold, but is no longer. Then there is the yuan virtual, that's backed up by production. That is the importance of infrastructure or infrastructuring of nations plus production. So then the nations can rebuild, because not only the rebuilding of the holy cities laid waste for many centuries, but the Gentiles were included in the plan. So then we find ourselves then studying the consequences, for instance, of this police state. There are many FEMA camps throughout the United States, and also not only the United States, regarding FEMA camps, mostly related with the people that are non-legals. So then when times of unrest come, then obviously those who do not have the document, they are going to end up in a FEMA camp. Not only this, but the United States is also moving Plum Island, that is a biohazard relation with the bio warfare started by the Nazi Eric Traub. Then these facilities going to move to Kansas, where then animals are being then obviously cared for. So then let's try to unite these understandings so then we understand a plan, the sinister plan of the United States. We find themselves then aware of the fact that they can't hold for very long their monetary system. They are preparing themselves with the money gathered from the world because they are dependent upon USD. The United States has a production of 1/60 or trillions, but they spend over 60. How do they get the money for these projects other than mesmerizing the world thinking the USD is important when it is no longer? So then we find ourselves understanding then the police state coming, FEMA camps to hold those people that are non-legals, and then the extermination of these people via pandemics generated by these viruses produced by the very country. They have already gaskets by the thousands near these FEMA camps. So then what is the objective? Well, obviously then when these people are in prison, they won't be able to maintain these people for very long. It's very expensive. Obviously a pandemic amongst then the animals in Kansas, then they're going to give contaminated meat to those people. They eat and they will die by the thousands, because fits 4 of them in each gasket. So then the sinister plan then is coming to an end, because the United States won't be able to hold for very long. So then, understandably, the Holy Instructions is giving us then a very precise understanding of the time of the restoration period after 7009, known as 2009, where then the cities of the Messiah are returning, and then the Gentiles included, where then China, precisely as stated in the Apocrypha, or the extra writings of Daniel mentioning of the understanding of Baal and the dragon, where dragon obviously defeats and wins. Dragon is China. The Northern Kingdom is the Soviet Union. Southern Kingdom is then obviously Africa. These are the designers of the time of the end. The United States must retrieve from the world and then rebuild themselves. There is no other option. The Holy Instructions, if they read the 11th chapter, does not state in the West. Deals with the North and South, and we understand obviously then the Kingdom of the East being China, and is absolutely depicted in a spiritual sense related with the Apocrypha. So then these give us then absolutely certainty what God then is doing in this planet. He's going to teach the people that He will refurbish this planet as per instructions, while the nations are retrieving and rebuilding, and then the designers are working together for the restoration of direct trade with people. Governments no longer can manipulate the people. The people, they have the power. As it was during the time of Ishmael, when he was given then the kingship, and he did direct trade himself with the people, and his people working for him. Because Ezekiel 37th chapter speaks of two sticks of authority, one of them for the first son, the second for the second son. And as we understand, the decentralization of the governments must be under the directive understanding and influence of the dragon. As we understand, Dragon Mart is already in Dubai, Dragon Mart has in China, Dragon Mart in Cancun. Then it doesn't take very long for you to understand the decentralization of the rest of the world, such as then South Pacific, Dragon Mart. So then South Pacific is taken care of. We understand many of the islands around are doing mining. So then Australia becoming then a center or a hub of distribution center of the South Pacific. Plus they can take care of smeltering of metals, and then later when the post-Panamax ships, those very large ships, they come, then with the products from China, they can return then to China with the metals required to do the manufacturing. Thus then the South Pacific is taken, and the whole Pacific already organized. We in the West, unfortunately, we are ignorant because we were mesmerized by Nahashatan of his last 200 years, then manipulated and directed via the United States. But it's no longer the case. As we understand, many of the schemes of the United States are being discovered. And we understand also those people who are invested in USD, or the system of the monetary value of the United States, when then the system fails, every investment will to be ruined. Because USD is no longer backed up by gold. So let's evaluate then. We already know, for instance, the police state. We understand the United States is already divided in 10 sectors, where then in a situation of a riot, and obviously will to, because there is no plan in the United States of coming up with a virtual system of USD, making USDV, so then the people can purchase virtual units of USDV. So then when the Chinese system becomes available via online for trade for every person, then they can do a simple conversion of USDV with U1V, making it simpler, and then the governments won't be able to get taxes from, because without USDV there is no way of charging taxes later. Why? Because people, they would have to use the USD if yet during this time USD is yet active. More than likely not. But let's say for instance if it is, then people would have to purchase the virtual units of U1 so they can store on their computers to buy from the Dragon Mart. However, the government can't charge taxes because it's done via a monetary system outside of their control. The only way and the only solution is obviously having a deal with the freighters of the earth, as is spoken of by the machine Revelation and the freighters of the earth, so they can land their tracking systems, so then the government has a maintenance and a record of what's being purchased. So then obviously when there is a label generated for the parcel, then comes the part number, description, comes the price, and taxation must be instantly deducted. So then we understand United States thus far is condemned. Simply a situation of time. So then, a couple of years ago, there was then a report of IMF. Even obviously the Prime Minister of Israel mentioned both of them at the same time. 5 years would be the maximum time of this manipulation of the system of the world, or the financial system manipulated by the USD. Would last no longer than 5 years. 2 years is already gone. Another 6 months is gone. roughly 30 months until the USD falls. And the world is understanding that the expensive projects of the United States is not only paid by the country but the rest of the world. So then let me ask you this. Let's say, for instance, in Brazil, why then is the Brazilian government paying twice the price of a unit of real to get one junky USD? It's not very smart, because USD is no longer backed up by gold. It's only a piece of paper. So then, if a person is smart, understandably the Dragon Mart is going to be worldwide. So then later, when the system of the Chinese becomes available via online, when they order their products, they can get from the nearest Dragon Mart of their homes, obviously. But there is a situation that goes on because the Chinese system uses the yuan. And when yuan is already virtual, but yet it's not divulged, later a conversion via virtual can be done very easily if real becomes virtual also. So not only for instance, the real being then obviously backed up by gold and the central bank has control over it, but then having the real virtual, or RV, so then people at the moment, while they are investing on USD, they can start get rid of their USD properties, or then whatsoever they invest on, and then start investing in RV, units of purchase of real virtual, as we understand, for instance, from Bitcoin. So then a dual system can be established. So then later, this unit of RV can be done via the average price of the yuan backed up by gold price. Obviously, a person, if he's smart, can understand the Dragon system and then use the gold at the moment, because the gold is related directly with central bank, but not the virtual. China, because it was chosen to make production available for the nations to rebuild, then they have the virtual, but it's yet a secret. But direct trade system with China provides then the answer why we don't get answers from the virtual system or direct trade. In order for the Dragon to have then the 100% control over the system must be decentralized. Nations can no longer be in charge of their own finances. The Dragon must be. It must be decentralized, because the Ishmaelites must receive the decentralized system as it was during the time of Ishmael, because they must control the freighters via crude or petroleum. Thus the stick of authority of the Ishmaelites, because of the most crude in the earth. So then we understand that the time is coming, or then in the very near future, the next 30 months, we should expect big changes regarding the finances of the world. As we understand, United Kingdom is bankrupt. As we understand, United States is bankrupt. Nations that used to be strong, such as Germany, they are involved with the Eurozone. It must be dismantled until China has the sole partnership around the world, starting with the Dragon Mart, obviously because they have the most inexpensive prices of products. But regarding then the biblical understanding, or then the holy instructions, we find then the world must have reasonable priced material so they can rebuild themselves. So they will understand then what the Creator wants to do with this planet later in the future. So then, the Ozarks. Let's say the United States then worked so diligently for so many years building the Ozarks. Thousands upon thousands of square miles over there. Why have they taken the time to build this place? Let's understand then what it comes from. The United States unfortunately believed the false instruction where the Greco and the Romans come up with their own translation, and they did not understand in the layers of the prophetic. They were given the wrong instructions. So then they began to read, and they thought themselves they would come up with a holy city of their own. Thus then you find 12 cities underground over there in the Ozarks, built with stolen money from the people. Not only the United States people, but any nation dealing with USD, they were also stolen, because every time they manipulate the USD, other nations pay for it. And then 12 gates in the midst of the mountain. Let me ask you this. Did not the prophet say in the land of Cush would come then the first holy city? And there is another problem. Since the system is becoming decentralized, how is the government going to charge taxes? Since the freighters of the United States, such as FedEx, has the best prices, must give the prime spot. UPS, that has every aircraft and every truck and every car and every property paid for. DHL and the other freighters, via air, sea, or land. How are they going to function without having the services properly organized from the existing system? So do we think is going to have riots in the United States? Are they going to have a police state using biohazard problems over there then to mesmerize and destroy the people? How can the governments then understand the importance of the freighters? Freighters have contracts with factories. UPS, for instance, when they deliver products from China, they have a contract until the products are delivered. How can the United States be in a state of a riot and then products being delivered? Is the United States stupid? They are stupid beyond measure, because they were given the wrong instructions. So great news for the freighters of the United States. They have earned United States governance problems. The freighters of the United States must come up with a plan of stabilizing the economy and lining up for the reasons of the dragon. There is absolutely no option. Because let's evaluate the system of the Chinese. They are very smart. If you are familiar with Bitcoin and eBay and PayPal, then you have the basics of understanding. When you have, for instance, eBay, you understand you have to have PayPal or some sort of payment related with the centralized banking. Very nice. You have your social security number, you have a bank that you bank with, and then you have funding in this bank and you sign up for PayPal. Then you do a transfer from your bank to PayPal, then you have a number over there. Then you purchase via online using a centralized system. Very nice. You purchase and you receive at your home. The freighters, they get the product from whatsoever place is coming from, delivered to your home. Very simple. Now let's evaluate it from the Chinese standpoint. Centralized banking we already understand. What about the virtual? When Americans began their quest, understanding the importance of the yuan virtual as they began their investments on products. Because then the system of the Chinese is very simple. You find then, for instance, eBay, but every product you can think of is going to have an investment icon. Let's say infrastructure and mining. What can you understand of materials? You can understand, for instance, machines that make holes in the ground to get the materials out of the earth. Wires for construction. So if you think then a particular wire is going to go for sale for a very reasonable price and many countries would purchase, what would you do? You log on in the system of the dragon and you select a wire, and then you think maybe 10 nations would purchase this for a year. Then you invest directly on the product. But your purchase is done then online via yuan virtual. You don't purchase with USD. How is the government going to maintain a record of it? So is the United States stupid? Yes, they are stupid. They were given the wrong instructions. They prepared for so long for an end that does not exist. And then not only this, but then when America started doing this trade via online and investing at the same time and receiving from the same system, there is no way of finding out what people are making or earning. They don't understand what people are spending on. They don't understand what's coming in the box. Speaking of taxes, absolutely no way, because it is property rights. Individuals, they have the right of protecting their numbers and their banking system, though the government could find it very easily, but they can play with it. They maybe read what you have in the bank, but they can't take it from you. Now let me ask you this, when the virtual system of the Chinese becomes available, how are they going to control? Then imagine the number of thousands of people ordering products at the same time. How are they going to handle those packages at the airports? At ports, ships coming in, lining up for obviously trying to unload their cargo and no space in the port. How are they going through security with it? Why do they know what's in the box? They don't even know. So then, understandably, the freighters, they have a contract with China. They have to deliver the product. How is the government of the United States not having enough infrastructure of their own to handle so many packages? But then the freighters have to have then the capacity of delivery of those packages, or they have no more contract. How is the United States going to deal with it? Going underground. And the lies and the schemes in Mountain View in Arkansas, and so many banks being built for 53 people for one bank, whereas we understand in New York is 7,000 people for a bank, in Los Angeles 11,000 people for a bank. How did they get so much money? Oh, so they thought they were some sort of elite. No, they are scoundrels. And worse yet, they have no answers for the freighters. How can then the trucks and ships then deliver their cargo? So then, the freighters of the United States, they earn the country's problems, or they have no contract elsewhere. They have to make a choice. Because since then, for instance, the freighters have a contract with China to deliver the product, and then the Chinese system becomes available, and people are purchasing, how are they going to deliver them? These forces, the freighters, have come up with a plan of their own, excluding the U.S. government. Speaking of military of the United States around the world, absolutely unheard of anymore. They can maintain the system. So there is no choice for the United States other than retrieving from the world and going home, rebuilding themselves, and let then China, Soviet Union, and Africa design what they must. The question is, how are the freighters going to deliver the packages? So please stay tuned, much more coming up.